let's take a look at the setup settings for jobs. So starting from the top, we've got new record defaults. So every time you create a new job, you can specify that the field label for the custom fields 1, 2 and 3 are certain values. You can also set that the start date for a new job is set to today. Then you can also specify on creating a record or a job to use either a serial number for the job number or to allow you to enter in a manually entered number as the job number, like an alphanumeric number. So figures for job costing analysis. This is where you can specify whether to use sales figures from either sales orders or sales invoices. Some companies prefer to use sales orders because as they're going through the job, they'll be generating sales orders but not generating the sales invoices until the job is complete. So in that case, you'd use sales orders figures so that you have a good idea of how your sales are going from a job costing point of view throughout the job. You also have the option to include sales order costs, and when you turn that on, you can specify to always include them or only when a sales order has been invoiced or when a sales order has been shipped if you're dealing with products. Okay, and there's another option that's similar to that to include purchase order costs. And the reason for being able to turn these on and off is that in some cases you'd only want to include purchase order costs, and in some cases you should only want to include sales order costs, but actually having them both turned on gives you the potential of doubling up on costs on a job. So usually it's either one or the other if you use both sales orders and purchase order modules, because you have the ability from a sales order to create a purchase order. So in other words, you don't want the costs from both transactions being used from a job costing point of view on the job screen. The next option we have is that when duplicating a job, you have the ability to also duplicate any related stages and tasks that are linked to the job that you're duplicating. So this is very useful for setting up template jobs, where, for example, if you do jobs regularly that usually have the same stages or tasks in them, well then you could set up a job and even put your own company name as the customer so they're easy to find, specify all those different stages and tasks for that job so that when you want to go and duplicate that template job, it'll save you having to re-enter all the stages and tasks that are related to that new job. So this is a very useful feature. The next section is relating to resource defaults for rental use on jobs. The JobPro has the ability to basically book in and track resources on a job. Now a resource can be a contact, it can be a location, which is usually something like a room or a meeting room, or it can also be a unit, which is basically like an asset, something that's tracked by a serial number. So on a job, you can default that when you use and book in resources, that you can default them to be billable, and that's what this section is here for. You can also specify that when you're invoicing from a billable job with resources on it, that you want to round the billing quantity either up or down. And this is useful for companies that rent out items, for example, and if they rent out something and it's based usually on a daily rate, then if that item arrives back in a little bit early, the actual rate can be rounded up as opposed to down, or vice versa. Over on the right hand side, you can enter in a default job brief. So every time you create a job, it'll default the job brief to be the text that you put in here. Then at the bottom of the section, you've got display quotation line items option. Now this means that on every job that you create, it defaults, if you've this turned on, to display on the job brief any related quote line items that have been approved that are linked to that job. Now it doesn't display financial information on the job brief from the quotation lines, but just information that might be useful to print out on job briefs relating to that job.